College football playoff rankings are out, so let's react to them. I'm interested in a couple of different aspects because first and maybe foremost, Boise State at 12 is really interesting to me. And I think you can ask, question, etc. Is Boise State at 12 because the College Football Playoff Committee thinks that Boise State is the 12th best team in the country? Or is Boise State at 12 because that sure makes the bracket look nice and easy that, hey, you know what? This team that is part of a somewhat controversial setup that isn't super popular with our members is just we're going to put them there so it doesn't look as if somebody that's not one of the top 12 teams in the country gets into the college football playoff. Because Boise State at 12 and Army at 25, to me, sure feels as if that is saying Boise State can lose again and still get into the college football playoff. That they are almost excluding the loss to Oregon as, you know what? You lost by a couple of points, probably should have won, probably got jobbed out of the win. And so we'll give you that one get-out-of-loss free card. And Army, you're going to have to go undefeated. You're going to have to beat Notre Dame. You're going to have to beat Navy. You're going to have to win the American. I guess we'll know before they play Navy. You're going to have to win the American Athletic Conference. Undefeated to have a shot. Because 12 to 25 is a big gap. Iowa State Pitt lost for the first time. They didn't tumble 12 spots. They didn't tumble 13 spots. Texas A&M lost for the second time. LSU lost again. They didn't tumble 12 spots. So with Boise State being ranked at 12, how do I read into that? What I read into it right now is that's the cutoff. 11 through 1 are firmly in the playoff. And unless 11 through 1 lose, which is bound to happen, that's where it is. For SMU and Texas, Texas A&M, and LSU. With SMU and Texas A&M being viewed as the first two out. You need Indiana, BYU, Notre Dame. I guess Indiana to lose once. BYU, Notre Dame, Alabama to lose again. And I find that setup pretty interesting. Because with Indiana and BYU being 8 and 9, that is essentially saying, like, hey, we don't necessarily respect you two Power 4 undefeated teams. And we've had this argument of what Indiana should be, what BYU should be. BYU's got a little bit better of a resume, I think, than Indiana. BYU beat Kansas State. Kind of beat the hell out of Kansas State. And Kansas State's number 19 team in the country. Indiana's best win is against 5-4 Washington. So it's not really apples to apples. I think you could argue that BYU deserves to be ranked above Indiana. But what you're saying is those two schools need to lose a game, and Alabama needs to lose probably another time before SMU and Texas A&M have a chance to leapfrog. And what it's saying is there is a gigantic gap between Boise State and Army. That there is a Grand Canyon-sized leap because the Black Knights are 8-0. Have the Black Knights beaten anybody? No, not especially. Notre Dame and Navy are still on the schedule, but only one of them is going to matter in the college football playoff rankings. So what it says is Army's got to go 12-0 11-0, and then a conference championship game, and then play Navy to have a chance to be in the college football playoff. That essentially it is arguing Boise State's spot is all but secure. And even if they lose for a second time, it's still not a foregone conclusion that undefeated Army is going to leapfrog them. So that is something super interesting to me to watch. In should Boise State lose again, how far do they fall and how high does Army climb? Because you will likely see a school like SMU, a school like Pitt, Iowa State, Kansas State, Colorado drop a game. And so how high does Army move up if they continue to win? And how far does Boise State drop should there be a loss on their schedule? But to me, that's kind of the point of delineation, is these 11 schools from Alabama, Notre Dame, BYU, Indiana, Tennessee, Penn State, Texas, Miami, Georgia, Ohio State, Oregon. That's what we view as the playoff. And for SMU, no, you've only got a loss. Sorry. But you're going to have a big time, there needs to be big time chaos in front of you for you to get past Alabama, and for Texas A&M to get past Boise State. For LSU, there needs to be full-on chaos. Texas needs to lose again. Notre Dame needs to lose again. Penn State, Tennessee. I know that the argument is out there that Indiana, if they only lose to Ohio State, is in. I don't think that that's a foregone conclusion, especially being at number 8. Now, the argument is if you are number 8 and you lose to what is now the number 2 team in the country, how bad are you? Are you one of the 11 best teams? I don't know. But those are sort of my instant reactions. There is a clear line of like 11 through 1, you went out, you're in. This is the field. You only have yourself to blame if from right now to the end of the season, if you are not in the field come December, you've only got you to blame. Now, it's generally not how it works, right? Like, it's not that everybody wins out, everything stays chalk, and we're all singing Kumbaya on Selection Sunday. But my initial thought is Boise State has a huge gap back to the next challenger. And they can lose again, I think, and still be okay. I think we are going to get to the point of, is Boise State going to be ranked above the Big 12 champion? That is what I would start to question and wonder as we get closer and closer to Selection Day. Is if BYU loses at any point, is Boise State, Mountain West champion Boise State, are they the 4th highest ranked conference champion? And I think the answer to that is yeah, probably. So that is something to watch for as well, because what the committee says by putting BYU at number 9, undefeated BYU, after Georgia, Texas, Penn State, Tennessee, Ohio State, that all have losses. What they are saying is, we don't have a ton of respect for you right now. We don't think that you really are one of the 11 best teams in the country. Because if we thought that you were one of the best teams, regardless of record, BYU and Indiana would be ranked above a Penn State, would be ranked above Tennessee. So that's where I think you start to see these very clear lines in the sand, is that to them, Oregon is undoubtedly the number 1 team in the country. And then Ohio State and Georgia are number 2 and 3, and they might be interchangeable. That Ohio State's loss is better than Georgia's loss, so Ohio State goes to the front. Miami, similar boat. You're undefeated, but we don't necessarily know who you are and feel strongly that you are, by God, one of the best teams in America. Texas, we feel really strongly that you are really good, but we have to put you behind Georgia because you lost to them. Penn State, we think you're pretty good because we're going to put you above Tennessee. But you have a loss to the number 2 team in the country, so we're not going to drop you down all that far. Indiana and BYU, I don't think you're that great. But we think you are better than the first team with a real no margin for error. Right now, Notre Dame and Alabama have a no margin for error. You lose again, you're done. Where it certainly, to me, looks like Ohio State, Georgia, Texas, Penn State, Tennessee have, and to a lesser extent, Tennessee and Penn State have a little smaller margin for error. If you lose again, you might find yourself in the 10 and 11 spot. Ohio State could probably lose again, find themselves in the 8 or 9 spot. Same for Texas, same for Georgia. But there are clear groups of Notre Dame, Alabama. You're on thin ice. Ohio State, Georgia, Texas, you're on a little bit thicker ice. You're on pretty thick ice. You've got a lot of room to work with. Army, you got no margin for error. Boise State, you've got a pretty big margin for error. If you screw up again, you're still in really good position to make the college football playoff. But the key is taking this first group rankings and then kind of juxtaposing them to how it continues to look. Because we talked about there's a precedent that you set when you start the rankings with a 12-team expanded college football playoff that you can't say, and I think the college football playoff has been guilty of this in the past, where going into the Selection Sunday, was Kirby Hocutt a few years ago who said the difference between Ohio State and Alabama is a razor's edge. It's so thin. And Ohio State wins the Big Ten championship, and Alabama didn't play in the SEC championship game. And Alabama goes to the college football playoff, and Ohio State doesn't. Well, if you say it's a razor's edge and one team wins their conference and the other team doesn't play, and the team who didn't play goes to the playoff, then it wasn't a razor's edge. And that's where I think the college football playoff gets in trouble, because I will die on the hill that college football is a business masquerading as a sport. And a college football playoff is a TV show masquerading as a sport. And so when it's just this gigantic TV show, they need people to tune in. They need people to watch. They have to create drama. But the sport is inherently drama-filled. The sport is filled with drama at all times. You do not need to manufacture it. So what you do by setting the stage in week number 1 is say, hey, this is what it would look like right now. And so if Alabama continues to win and everybody from 11 to 1 continues to win, you then can't come in later and go like, well, hell, you know what? SMU made the ACC championship game and lost, but screw it, we're putting them at 11. You can't do that. You can't do it. So I'm interested to see how this continues to take shape throughout the next couple of weeks, because this is a good look at what it would and should look like right now. But does it stay that way? It'll probably certainly give us something to bitch about if it doesn't. That'll do it for today's episode of the Daily Huddle. I want your thoughts and comments. Let me know in the comments down below. What do you think? What's your initial reaction to the college football playoff rankings in the first week? Think Indiana's too high? Think BYU's too low? Let me know in the comments down below. If you're watching on YouTube, hit the subscribe button. Make sure you're getting all the great college football content we are pumping out. You listen on the podcast feed, drop a 5-star review. Goes a long way in helping out the channel. I'll see you tomorrow for another episode of the Daily Huddle.